Since the early 2000s, our lives have converted almost completely to digital, and even more so to the virtual. A single hard drive can hold the equivalent of an entire library of information. Photos, films, books, even interpersonal communication now can exist primarily in the digital space. But with this change, many have felt a personal detachment, a longing for the tangible. Sales of vinyl records have skyrocketed to pre-90s levels. Cassettes and even film sales have steadily risen since the late 2010s. Jamie Maldonado is a man who understands this. Founder of Piney Woods Darkroom, a non-profit community darkroom near the Tyler Public Library, Jamie seeks to educate others in keeping film alive in the world of photography. I had a great time talking photography, film, and tangibility with him, and I hope you will too, as we go and meet Jamie Maldonado.
Yeah. It exists.
Was it like photography YouTube? Or?
Yeah, it was photo-based YouTube. Kind of started just hybrid digital film stuff, and then I just kept doing more and more film stuff. But then there was also, what's it called? Oh, yeah, the pandemic thing. And that was like, I mean, of course, just like everyone else, I did tons of content through the pandemic. But then after that, about a year after that started, my mom got sick and passed away, so that was just kind of like tapered off from there. And when you miss some uploads on the algorithm, they don't like it.
It doesn't like it.
No.
Yeah. So what was it focused on? Anything in particular?
Mostly just about film photography. I mean, it's hard on YouTube not to do just reviews.
Yeah.
Like you just kind of get sucked into it. It's like, well, nothing gets any traction unless you say Nikon, F3, Hasselblad, Kodak Gold. So I try to like say this is Kodak Gold review, and then I do my own thing for 10 minutes, trying to make it my own thing. I did the last video I worked on was 10-minute long fake film noir. That was a review for a black and white film. Really like it, but I didn't get to film one segment of it, and I've been sitting on it for like 4 or 5 months now, and my music license is about to run out. Because I didn't want to keep renewing it because I just don't upload. So I'm like, I've got another week before that license runs out, so I'm going to upload it like it's a missing film. I'm going to put little cards, like if you've seen Metropolis, where they have missing scenes, and they'll put a card up saying what happened during the scene. So I'm going to do that for the missing scene. It's like this lost film review was found, partially damaged.
So was it like filmed on film, or
no,
was it just about a black and white film?
It's about a black and white film. I really would love to do like a 16 millimeter vlog, but don't really have the budget. But
it gets expensive.
Yeah, I filmed part of it on VHS, so that was interesting.
Yeah, like old VHS.
Yeah, big camcorder.
Yeah, no, that's cool, man.
Oh yeah.
Well, today I'm talking with Jamie. What's your last name?
Maldonado.
Maldonado.
Yep.
He's from Piney Woods Darkroom here in Tyler, Texas, and I'll let him just kind of describe what they do, and then we'll go from there.
We're a 501c3 nonprofit community darkroom, which is a photographic darkroom, all the traditional film photography stuff, black and white printing, color film developing, anything that happened before 2000, I guess. Yeah. And I mean, it's all most of it's updated, and most of it has modern twists, and there's a lot of digital integration too. So anything from processes they did like in 1850s, 60s, something like that, all the way up till now, people are still innovating things. So it's just anything that's based in the analog process that a lot of times you'll find that you'll take the picture and you just have to trust that it turns out, that kind of thing. We just kind of give access to all of that, to education, which has also disappeared, and all of that. It's just kind of, especially in this area, it's kind of a desert for education in analog photography and things like buying film or film cameras. It's just there's not a lot of resources around here. And I think that's one of the reasons we were actually able to achieve 501c3 status, because there's no market competition. If this were the 90s, it wouldn't be a nonprofit, because it would just be like, well, that's big commercial business. Why are you a nonprofit?
Yeah. So I guess explain what the nonprofit aspect of it is.
It's I guess it would classify as a public charity. It's an arts and education type of charity, and we provide access to that education and the reason that film cameras and film and stuff like that like fit in with that is because they are literally, like you can't make it without without the materials. So it's very tightly connected, and we don't sell a lot of stuff that's not connected directly to that or to the practice of photography. And in reality, and despite leaning on it in our opening months, like the retail side, I guess you would say, ultimately, I think the money makers here, so to speak, are like the educational classes, the memberships for people getting to use the facilities and things like that. So I expect that to take over completely over the years. So
yeah. So I guess how did the idea for it come about?
That's a good question. Yeah. So I had wanted to be a photography teacher for a long time. I was a student of O. Rufus Lovett at Kilgore College, and worked in the newspaper over there too. And none of it's around now, but I was like really into that, and wanted to be a teacher, wanted to teach something to do with photography and journalism. Eventually got focused on photography, and then I went to grad school, went through that whole thing, and got out, and I was like, okay, I'm ready to teach now. And then they shut down the photo program at Kilgore College, and then every other photo program or film photography program was just gone. So I'm like, okay, so what do I do now? Before I could figure that out, the pandemic hit. And I was like, well, I guess I'm not teaching.
Yeah.
And I had been developing film as favors for people, and then it turned into like, hey, this guy develops film, pay me $10 or $12, and you can get a roll of film developed. And that became like doing a few rolls for a friend to doing dozens of rolls for a bunch of people I'd never met. And also, though, I'm like, I can't make a full business out of being a photo lab. It just, I would like to, but it's just not what I want to do. For one thing, is just be a photo lab, but also the market in this area was like a void. It's like I have no idea what that looks like. But over that pandemic year was a make or break for film photography, because I sat at the beginning, I'm like, this is either going to be really good or really terrible, because it was starting to get its legs back. It was really starting to hit again. Mm-hmm. And then like, well, are people going to quit because we're locked in, or are they going to discover it? And they discovered it, and it just has boomed since the pandemic. And so I'm like, okay, these cameras I was finding actually, I lost my job at the beginning of the pandemic. I had hoarded cameras because you couldn't sell, you could barely give away a film camera for a while there. Mm-hmm. So I had hoarded them because like, I love these things, so I purchased cheaply so many of them. All of a sudden, those were worth a lot of money because people wanted them again. So I'm like, okay, I don't need 20 of them. So I've got 20 others I can keep. So I sold them, and I was like, made several $1,000s to kind of make it out of that initial blow from the pandemic. It's kind of escape from that. So I'm like, cool. So I have, I do a lot of exposition.
No, you're
okay,
fine.
Cool. So that goes from like, okay, so I'm developing a lot of film for people, and it's getting almost overwhelming. It did get overwhelming. It was like, okay, this is a lot of film. I had to like get real serious about my routine with that. And then I was like, I was selling cameras, and like, I don't want to be a retailer. I just don't. I want to teach. So I'm like, if only there was a way I could teach and then sell for a little side income or something. And then at the same time, this little phenomenon popped up during the pandemic called Clubhouse. Did you ever do Clubhouse?
I guess
it was a little chat room app, basically. And,
oh yeah,
and you would like
coming up.
And you would have like little chat rooms with audio chat, and got into this film photography one, and there were a few people in there, and I like hit it off with them, and we kept talking. And one of them was a person. She was living in New Jersey at the time with family stuff, but was based out of California, and she had a community darkroom. And I'm like, community darkroom? What? Like, I've heard of those. Like, do they still do that? Or like, does that work at a place that isn't Dallas or Austin? And she's like, she's in Joshua Tree, like in the Joshua Tree area. And she's like, yeah, it was great. You know, like everything was shut down at the point still. So, but she is like, yeah, you should come out here and I'll show you, show you the dark room and tell you how I did things, and maybe you can learn something from it or whatever. And so I took her up on it. This was right after my mom had passed away. So I'm like, driving to California sounds fun. And I did that. I drove to California, which was midway through the desert in Arizona. I'm like, this is a really, really long drive by myself. So that was something interesting. But I got out there, had a blast. Got to see, it wasn't like some college lab. It wasn't some overly built, extremely complex scientific level lab. It was just a retail space she had managed to convert into a proper working darkroom. And I'm like, it made it real. It made it real and attainable. I'm like, okay, if it can work and not, I mean, it's Joshua Tree. It's a nationally known park, internationally, I guess. But if she can make it work with a kind of, like, not huge population there, maybe we got a chance in East Texas. Because I'd noticed, like, people would ask me, it's like, does anyone, are there even enough film shooters in East Texas? I'm like, I think there are, because I'm developing at least a dozen of them film, and a dozen others develop their own. And, like, if I put all that math together and think of all those retired dentists who used to take the same class over and over again or semi-retired dentists who would take the same class over and over again just to use the darkrooms at Kilgore College, I think I might have enough people that could make a tight rotation of people doing a darkroom. And then I continued that for about a year, and the more work I put into it, the more I saw that it was actually realistic. And the last hurdle was like, where does the money come from? What is, and then people kept saying, oh, is it nonprofit? And I'm like, oh no, that's way too hard to deal with. Like, that's way too much trouble. I have known nothing about nonprofits. There's no way I could figure that out. And it kept coming up. And then finally I have a cousin who is like a nonprofit guru in Austin. And she started several nonprofits and teaches people how to do them. She's like, okay, let's talk. And we had a little phone consultation. I mean, I've known her probably my whole life, but yeah, she's we sat down because she's like been a photography and arts enthusiast and stuff. She's just maybe 10 years older than I am, something like that. So like we were similar mindsets and everything, and she explained all the stuff to me, and all of a sudden I was like, well, that's actually, I might be crazy, but that sounds attainable. And with that, I just kind of timidly stepped into LegalZoom world, and and here we are. Like, I got approved for 501c3 status, and as soon as I was fairly confident I would be approved, I announced a fundraiser on Indiegogo. I don't even think it's been a full year ago, and had other donate buttons and stuff. So I wound up getting about $2,500 in donations from each source, and that was my kickoff, and here I am a year later, sitting in the darkroom. So
I guess a good question now is, like, how is it going?
It's going surprisingly well. Like, I mean, not surprising as in, oh no, I didn't expect anyone to show up. It's like, I expected some people to show up, but a good number, and probably more than most people expected to show up. But the reality has been like double probably what I was expecting in my best guesses. I'm like, okay, this is a really good, like, I came in here today for this, like, we're closed today. Mm-hmm. I showed up not 10 minutes because I was going to meet a friend who picked up some cameras for me at a thrift store on a recent vacation, and two people come in as soon as I open the door, and they want to look around and take classes and drop off film to develop. And every time I show up and I'm not open, like, if I turn on the light, somebody pulls up, and I'm like, these are not the people I knew. These aren't the people I was developing film for, 2 years ago. These are new to me people who heard about this often from word of mouth from someone else. Just an area business, somebody on Facebook, somebody's posted on Reddit. I've never even given a moment's attention to Reddit on promotion. And this person posted about it. got like several thousand views on Reddit. I'm like, well, thank you.
Yeah.
I couldn't buy that kind of exposure, so things like that. So I'm very excited because I looked at the map when I was starting out. I'm like, what's my service area? It's like Longview, Tyler, obviously. Kilgore used to have Kilgore College. There's probably still people who would have or still been taking those classes there. And but then I'm like, what does Shreveport have? They don't have anything. I couldn't find anything until like Memphis and some directions, like New Orleans and other directions. Is like we have a little bit of that in Dallas, a little bit of that in Houston. Yeah. I think Austin might have one. And then it's like, well, if you don't want to drive for 4 hours, you almost have nothing. So you don't even have a place to buy film. That's not a few cheap rolls of film at Walmart that you don't know how long they've been there.
Yeah.
And Polaroid is slightly accessible because they found their way into Walmarts and Targets and Best Buys and stuff. But that's about it.
Yeah. No, yeah, it's kind of cool that like the 600 models you can get the film for now.
Oh, yeah.
I picked my girlfriend up one for $3.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's the cool thing is
So-
those 600 cameras, as long as they didn't get wet or something, they're
Yeah.
pretty tough. Like, they hold up. Like, I haven't seen too many that don't work that weren't some... Like, it got damp and ruined or something like that. They mostly work. And I have the film, too. I just bought 2 boxes of it to suck. Well, if it sells, if it doesn't sell, I can shoot it because I like shooting it.
Yeah.
And I'll just eat that money as my own film. But the first box sold out within a week, and I'm chipping away through the other box. I knew it would sell slower, so that was kind of my theory. But yeah, so now I order double the amount next time and see how that goes, and whatever I can afford. So
Yeah. So what do you think, because it seems to be a trend that in music and photography and stuff, everything's kind of swinging on the pendulum back towards analog.
yeah, and I think that really has to do with tangibility. Because I remember when the vinyl record thing really took off, it was almost probably around 10, 12 years ago now that they reappeared at like Best Buy and stuff, and that was really unusual. I was like really shocked because I had like been a casual like, oh, vinyl's neat, and some friends in a band put out a record that was on vinyl, like an album that was on vinyl, and I'm like, oh, I gotta get that. I don't have anything to play it on, but it's cool.
Yeah. And
I grew up, with the last remnants of that. My mom had a record collection and stuff like that, lots of Beatles albums, and but yeah, like I think it's tangibility because people have everything on a phone now. And I was just talking with another friend earlier today, and we worked at the same college, and we were both campus photographers. And she had a good portion of the archives that she had shot in the 90s and early 2000s. And I had produced part of the archives from more recent years. And I had to work with a lot of those archives between. The archives from the 70s, 80s, and 90s were easily accessed, still in good quality because there were negatives and prints. The photographs from like 2006 to 2015, 16 were already getting hard to reach. The hard drives were failing, the files were inferior, and these were with professional cameras a lot of times. And so like I there's a trend right now of like those old digital cameras coming back, and I have this saying, like, I'm getting on a slight tangent, but but I have the thing, it's like, oh, they destroyed one generation's memories and now they're back for more. But in reality, I get it because it is still removed from the phone and from the electronic and from the cloud. So it's a step away, a step closer to tangibility. But I think people like records and probably printed books more and film and photographic prints because it's not as impermanent as we felt they were. Like the electronic file is not as permanent as it seems like it should be. Like, because in theory, those files could last eternity, but in reality, so many of those older ones are already gone or already. What if there's a standard that replaces JPEG one day? It hasn't happened in 30 years or whatever, but I mean, how many people can read an EPS now? And that was a common publishing format, and it's like you still kind of have to know what you're doing to open an EPS file. and it's just things like that. It's like, wow, it is not quite as permanent. And then there's like disc rot. So if you keep things, like you can keep, as long as it's like acid-free paper or something like that, as long as you properly store, we have like at least 100 years of knowledge of how do you store film, how do you store paper, and how is it safe. Mm-hmm. We have several hundred years of keeping books safe. But books on disc, it seems to be failing already after like 20 years. And so, and I think just the feeling of personal intangibility, like kids, like it gets buried on the phone behind new memories, but you can pin a photo to a wall and keep revisiting it for years. And there's very little degradation. It just kind of feels more tangible and real, I think, in a lot of cases. And I'm pretty sure that's a lot of the root of all of this.
Yeah. I kind of wonder if it's not... Because, like, I'll say a lot of the times when I'm recording, and somebody's like, oh, are we going too long? I'm like, it's digital. It costs nothing, you know?
Oh, yeah.
But there's also sort of a thing where, like, unless I get, like, a photo I take digitally or something, and I've started, like, printing them out.
Oh, yeah.
Because then it feels like I've actually done something.
Yeah. And
otherwise, it sits on the back hard drive of my laptop. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I think there's, like, a sort of value you automatically place into something.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And then, there's levels of it. There's integration. There's a fusion of technologies, which I'm trying to embrace here, too, that digital cameras are really cool. I mean, you can take so many unlimited, extremely high-quality photographs. Mm-hmm. You can learn how the aperture works in real time with results without having to write it down and remember when you get the prints or whatever. And then we use digital cameras to scan film, oddly enough. So we're taking pictures of analog photos with digital cameras, and it looks amazing. It looks beautiful. It reproduces it so well. I mean, that's not as weird as it sounds, because there were press and reproduction cameras in the film days too. It's just no one ever saw them because they were the size of a car and stuff like that. So, so it's not too weird, even though it's funny to think about in a lot of ways. But I lost what I was thinking, but I lost my track of thought. That finally happened.
I think we were talking about like the value.
Oh yeah, adding the value. Yeah. And I think that's like why I like shooting on film, because like I'm valuing the connection more with my subject, because I'm not looking at the back of the camera. They're not looking at the back of the camera. There's another level of trust. Like I've done this, hundreds of times now, and the chemistry's worked every other time. So unless Kodak fell down on a job, which if they do, there's going to be a lot of Hollywood studios breathing down their necks to get it right, because they that's their real business right now. Although I think they're starting to finally see a return on hanging around with film photography. Yeah. And so it's adding value to it, and even just printing out a digital thing adds a little more tangibility to it. And I think the idea that we had that we can only live on a little tablet device, we had maybe put a little bit too much faith into that idea. It's like, they're great, they're handy, but they don't have to replace everything, and they probably shouldn't replace everything. Yeah.
Well, too, I feel like something about using your phone takes you out of it. I was one of those people jumped on the Digicam trend. So I picked up a little Lumix camera. It was a later one, probably 2010 or so.
Oh, okay.
But went on vacation with my girlfriend, and it was nice because I wasn't checking photos on my phone or something. Yeah. I've got this camera, I'm taking photos, but this level less of detachment to this, online world.
Definitely. I agree. And they're not all bad. I'm not trying to just dissuade people. I'm like, you do what works for you. Yeah. And it's like, I just like to be like, just make sure you get one that you're not, if you get something on it, you're not going to regret getting it on that camera, because there's some older ones that, sure, they have nice color, but the files are just like they're on like weird cards that aren't made anymore. So I think people should use a little more caution and let it be what it is. It's an old camera that's not a phone. And just like I tell people, it's like, well, why are teenagers shooting film photos? I'm like, well, if you think about what's been happening with celebrities and stuff, you can't hack a film camera, and you can't hack one of those digicams either. Yeah. So there's a layer of security there.
So remember, put all your intimate photos on your
yeah, and exactly. And actually, I talked to this person on Instagram. She does a slideshow about her father and Playboy magazine, and but it's like this kind of one-person show, and she talks about how like her parents sent their lewd photos on film, and how all hers are on her phone, and how it feels cheap. And it's like, well, I'm like, that's another layer to think of it. It's like there's a value to those, especially among the couples and stuff like that it might be more tangible and higher quality and more meaningful to do that way.
Yeah. I mean,
not to get into a weird topic. Yeah, I'm trying to keep it more PG, but
I guess that goes back to that idea of value, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yep.
You can get on your phone in 5 seconds, be looking at whoever,
5 seconds,
versus, I guess taking time with your partner.
Oh yeah, and appreciating them. Yeah, exactly. And then like when phones and digital cameras came out, it's like, oh, now I don't have to hire this fancy photographer for my wedding and stuff, and like I can just do it on my little digital.
Oh man, I shot my friend's wedding. And no natural light whatsoever.
Oh, no.
And I've got the ISO just up to where it gets grainy, and I got my shutter speed really low, and so I've got like all these blurry shots of the bridesmaids and stuff, and then like the few that were in focus, half of them had somebody with their phone.
Oh no!
Taking a photo.
Yeah, and so like it cheapens the artist too. Like the people who do wedding photography as art, it cheapens it, and they have to give more and more for less. And it's like like the film era weddings were very, very tough to get natural feeling photos because you had such a limited palette to work with. And now you get to have these more journalistic style weddings, wedding photography that has been so popular for the last couple of decades now. It cheapens that because like they're like, oh well, I can take 1,000 pictures on my phone. What's it worth? And it's like, well, what about my $3,000, $4,000 camera that can shoot in only artificial light and still look nice, and all the skills I've acquired to learn how to shoot that way when I'm stuck in a situation, but you have memories that need to be made. It's like it can devalue that. So I think there's a lot of like we have a tendency to devalue things when they get quote unquote easy, and I think we're learning that the devaluing is not necessarily a good thing.
Yeah, for sure. So I want to talk about you for a minute. Okay. So how did you get into photography?
I guess the most prominent way. Sorry, there's
mosquito.
Oh yeah. So I was a teenager. I was into BMX and skateboarding, and this was mid '90s, right when like ESPN picked up on like that stuff with the X Games and Extreme Games. The first year or two they did it, and before that though, in the late '80s and early '90s, the benefits of having a slightly older brother who you're good friends with. He was into BMX and skating at the time too, and we had read this magazine called Freestyling, and it was a BMX magazine, and the staff on it included a young photographer named Spike Jonze, who's now an Oscar-winning movie director, and so he is just like. So we had just kind of got just before getting back into BMX, we were watching MTV at our uncle's house, and it's like Spike Jonze. I'm like, wait a second. That same Spike Jonze from those old magazines, And then over the next year, it's kind of like rediscovering all that scene. And I'm like, whoa, Spike Jonze is a major music video director now. That's crazy. Like, he's pals of the Beastie Boys and all these other bands, and all over MTV with Bjork and all that. And he started on this little magazine we read, and it's like, oh, his photographs are still like massively underrated, way overlooked. Like his BMX and skate photography has like really great energy, and those magazines they made are like creative Bibles almost for me. Like, they're just the design on them, like the designer of those magazines, the guy he was the main editor, but he was basically the primary designer, Andy Jenkins, became the art director at Girl Skateboards, which Spike also helped start. Mark Luman was the main writer, essentially, and he was the other part of that crew. And then Bob Osborne, who is the founder of that, and his daughter Wendy were also photographers. And Bob Osborne was like is still this amazing large format photographer. So like, I see what they're creating. I rediscovered this interest, like this really cool magazines that are still very inspiring to read even today. And I saw this, like, I want to do what Spike did,
Yeah.
when I'm reaching 16 years old and stuff. Like, when Spike was 17, 18 maybe, he took his SAT, dropped out of school right after he took the SAT. I think he may have graduated, but he left immediately, flew to California, and became a staff editor of Freestylin'. And then that process, it's like, it's like, what do I do? And they didn't have a photographer or something like on hand. And he's like, here, give me that Nikon, grab some film, let's see what happens. And then Wendy Osborne, the daughter of Bob Osborne, the publisher, was also a great photographer, great action photographer. And her brother was like a pro BMXer, so he had all this access, and he would just take all these photos, and that also led to like him taking pictures of skateboarders and becoming friends with like Sonic Youth and all kinds of stuff. And I mean, we have all of Jackass and Spike TV, not named for him, but I mean, like that, not Spike TV, Vice and Vice TV and stuff. That all kind of like he kind of was a huge catalyst for lots of those things. Definitely for Jackass, like, he was a co-creator, and that was really just an outgrowth of skate videos he helped make, and a culture of skate videos he helped establish, because there would always be a crash section in those, and then that was basically Jackass. And so like that just refined over the years, and he was like, you know what, we got something here, let's talk to some TV people. And the rest is history. And that, I'm like, I was sitting there 16 years old, I'm like 17 years old, I'm like, when I graduated, I want to do what Spike did. So I'm like, okay, so how do I do, like, Spike took photos, okay, I want to take photos. And I'd always been a little interested. I drew and everything, so I was always visually interested. Occasionally attempted to dabble in photography, but my mom's best friend took classes from Rufus Lovett at Kilgore College, and they're like, if you want to learn photography, take classes from Rufus. But I was still in high school at this time. I'm like, that's great for when I'm 18, but what about now? And then my older brother had signed up for the yearbook in middle school. And I remember one day he got to take home the yearbook camera, which is probably some little Canon AE something, or something to that effect at the time. And I'm like, that's how I get a camera, because I was way too poor to afford anything like that.
Yeah.
So I'm like, how do I get a camera being $0 and super poor? So I'm like, sign up for the yearbook. Waited a whole freaking summer. Like, the summer of 97 was complete agony, because I waited every day. It's like, what if I get on the yearbook? What if I get on the yearbook? I can get a camera. It was probably every day. And then finally they had orientation or sign-ups or something for that senior year. And we would get our schedules, and I see it on the schedule. I'm like, yearbook? Is it on there? And I go find a teacher, and I'm like, yes, you're on the yearbook staff. And cool. I go in the first day of school. I'm like, maybe I can use the camera sometime this year. They hand me the camera. They're like, nobody wants to do this. Here's the camera. That was possibly one of the best days of my life. Still.
Yeah. So did you concentrate on yearbook stuff, or were you using it extracurricular?
I would use it whenever I could, for sure. I got really into the yearbook thing, and it was such a small staff, and we wound up like the teacher quit after a couple months. Like, I guess she had like a hard pregnancy or something, and it's like, yeah, I'm out.
Yeah.
And then wound up as a senior in high school, not even 18 years old yet, filling out purchase orders for film and developing and helping run the yearbook until we established a new teacher. And so it was like this wild, like, kind of publication crash course, which is great because it was like, hey, I'm learning how to do page layout. I'm making a book. I'm doing the prototype skills to do something like Freestyle magazine or Homeboy magazine or these other things they worked on. And it's like, this is all what I want to do. So it was great because I was learning all the base skills for that and continued on through. And I did sign up for Rufus's class, and that was very helpful. And I won't meander through my 20s now, but that's how.
So did you stick with photography though as a business, or?
No, I actually got really into journalism because I swore off the yearbook after high school. It was so much work, and I was working into summer after graduating, still having to go to high school to work on the yearbook because we were so behind. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I'm done. No more yearbook. That was fun. I'll keep shooting photos though. And then first day in photo one, waiting for class to start, I picked up the campus newspaper, which I did really love, the Flare. They discontinued that a few years ago too, but I would read it when my mom would bring it home because she was a later in life college student, so she would bring the paper home, and I opened up the first day. My other love at the time was like drawing and comic books. So I opened up third page, there was an ad. It says comic artist wanted. I'm like, that's what I want to do. So I did that. Probably the worst comic artist ever in the history of the Flare. But, I mean, I had my own unique style. But
so did you do a series, or was it?
It was kind of a mixture. It was like kind of political cartoons, but not very political. Like there was one that, now only one that got censored. So and probably for good reason, especially now.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like it was just insensitive, but not in a like a racist way or anything. It was just like, ooh, I'm glad I didn't get published. That was kind of a little much.
Just one of those things.
Yeah, it's like I was 18.
Yeah, I
wouldn't get run out of town for it. I'm like, oh, I
just
would
feel
bad
embarrassed about it. Yeah,
it's like that was a little over the top. And but overall, it was fine. But it got my foot in the door, and I kept taking photos. But I got really wrapped up in journalism for several years, and kind of just did photography to the side. I knew how to do it. I would shoot games and stuff now and then because I knew how to use a camera. And then got really into newspaper design because that was, another part of all that stuff I got into.
So were you working for the newspaper then?
Yeah, I worked for the newspaper for the rest of the time I was at Kilgore College, became a page designer and eventually editor for the Stephen F. Austin newspaper, the Pine Log. Okay. Again, got hired at the Longview News Journal and Nacogdoches newspaper, the Daily Sentinel, and even took a 6-month temporary job at the Denver Post to see how I liked major metro newspapers. And so I was sitting there in Denver, I'm thinking, this is my the bottom of my mountain peak, I'm like, okay, this is where I
and
ascend.
The top's up and down the street.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, I'm looking at the top of the mountain right here, and now I can get like a real feeling for it. And at the time, I had just started shooting photos at concerts just because I had a digital camera. I was going to shows, and I was taking pictures there. I was getting really into it. So I have that as contrast. And I'm over here. I'm like, I want to design front pages for major newspapers because I've done it on every other place, and I love doing it. I look over. The guy who's doing the front page is 3 cubicles over from me. There's a Pulitzer Prize literally at my back. Like multiple Pulitzer Prize plaques hanging on the wall. And the guy is pulling his hair out practically because people are messing up his page so much. And there's so many hands in the cookie jar. I'm like, that's the mountaintop? Yeah. It's like, that's not really what I wanted. And that's when I realized, I'm like, I think I like photography better after all.
Yeah. So you mentioned music. Like, what kind of concerts were you going to?
I was friends with the band Isley. Did you...
Okay,
they're from Tyler. They toured with Coldplay in 2003 and had some modest radio success in Dallas and stuff like that. And
Okay.
really
And
great
the
band.
name does sound
Yeah.
super familiar.
Yeah, they're a really great band. They're still technically around, although a lot of the members have like kind of gone their own ways and stuff. They're like a
Yeah.
family band, but yeah. Things happen, I guess, over 20 years, but really love that music still, even the old stuff especially, like just really special. But it was really fun to go to those shows, and I became friends with them, and it's like, oh yeah, you want to sit on the stage and take photos? Cool.
Yeah.
And so that was just like, that got like really cool, and I did that a lot. And eventually I became friends with like people in other bands and stuff, and it was like, hey, can you take our pictures off stage? Like take some portraits. We need some promo shots. I'm like, okay. And then that got me into really into portraits. And then as newspapers were going out of my life, that was coming in. And then there was that period of like complete destitution, trying to be a working artist and figuring out how that works.
Yeah.
And then around that time, there was like the 2008-ish economic collapse. I'm like, okay, this is rough. I'm going, like me and millions of other people, going to go back to school, because I never did take the photo classes at Kilgore College. So I took photo classes again from Rufus and wound up helping with newspaper and doing all that stuff. And so that kind of like really deepened my photo education for several years and got me on the track to trying to become a teacher of photography, which led here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of here, I think it'd be a good time. So if somebody is interested in the darkroom or whatever, what do you suggest they do?
They can look at pineywoodsdarkroom.org or on Instagram, Piney Woods Darkroom. I think there's a Facebook page too, and there's emails on there. It's DMs on Instagram is super easy to get me at. You can come by 231 South College Avenue in Tyler. We're open especially Tuesday through Saturday, noon through 6, and often I'll have the lights on if I'm here, and I won't turn you away if you show up.
Yeah.
But I can't promise I won't. I have to have some days off, so I can't promise that I'll be here on a Sunday or a Monday, but I'll definitely let you in if you happen to be around.
Yeah.
But I'm happy to answer any questions. We develop film. We can teach you how to develop film. And if you don't even know what film is, we can tell you how to do that. Like I want to take people from that retired dentist who maybe I took classes with in the late 90s.
Yeah.
And they're sad that they don't have their constant darkroom access anymore, but they need a little refresher course. I'm happy to take everything from that person all the way to like, here, my mom gave me this old thing. How do I use it? What is it?
Yeah.
And I can start from that.
So how much is it to do classes and stuff like that?
We're doing right now, because it's been a learning process to see how this works here, doing a thing called crash courses, where I do a crash course in basically film developing and camera basics, or darkroom printing, or film scanning, and intended to be taken roughly in that order, but depends on where you're at on skills. But $50 for a 4-hour session of that. I'm looking at doing kind of a combination of the three, maybe like $125 for taking all 3 courses or whatever. They're 4-hour courses. For example, the film crash course, if you don't know anything about doing photos, we take a short roll of film, we go around downtown Tyler, we take some pictures, show you how to use a camera. If you have a camera, I'll show you how to use that camera. Come back here, develop the film. I'll show you how to do all of that. And at the end of that, you have a nice developed roll of film. And it's a little hard to fit in scanning that film, but it's kind of like we'll scan it for you real quick. Or ideally, you have that nice roll of black and white film, and you come back and you take the film printing class, learn how to print it in the old way in the darkroom, and you also learn how to scan it, so you have digital files directly from the negatives. So it's kind of like built to be in succession or as like a little refresher course. And they all serve as orientation for, I guess, what our other primary services is allowing lab access. So you can you know how to use you know how to develop film, you know how to use the sinks, you know how to set the temperature and the times and all that, and you know how to practice lab safety and all that. So you can develop your own film. If you shoot 20 rolls and you don't want to pay $12 a roll for develop and scan on all those, you take your 20 rolls and you spend a day up here developing them. You can spend a day up here printing them
Yeah.
and so on. So that's kind of my intended pathway. So
can people just pay to get their rolls developed too?
definitely. Yeah. If
Okay.
you just don't want to do that, or you have some film in the fridge, I've had people like that. It's like, I had this disposable camera laying around for a decade. Can you develop it? I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
It's $12 for most types of film, for most things, will wind up $12 or some, like, if you want like supersized, like certain types of files or something like that, it would cost a bit more. Or if you have slide film, it's a little bit more. There's
Yeah.
things like pushing and pulling, but for most films, just $12 for develop and scan. Takes roughly 3 to 5 business days.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, awesome, man. Is there anything else you want to add at the end, or?
We just had our grand opening, and we did a little photo walk, and there was a lot of people who did go and didn't get to go, and they're like, "Oh, I hope this happens more often." And so that has now turned into, I think, second Saturday of every month is going to be a photo walk, I think. So I'll just call it Shutter Saturday. And so we're going to, if there's a second Saturday in the month, whatever that, I'll announce dates, but those are, I think we're going to start doing that. If you have any questions, they'll be on the website. But if you don't find it on the website or just want to ask, just message me on Instagram or wherever. And I don't turn anything away. Come up here, even if you're like, film sucks, but I just want to look at the toys. For you to do that. Or if you don't have a film camera, we can fix that. And so on. So everyone's welcome. I want to be an inclusive and fun place. If you just want to kind of like, you're not sure and you just want to learn about it, I can do that. If you're ready and like just really want to take pictures now, I can help with that.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much for sitting down.
Thank you.
It's been a whole lot of fun, man.
Oh yeah, hopefully I didn't ramble off track too much.
No, man, no. I think that's perfect time.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Oh, hi. You made it to the end. Congratulations. Not many people do that. While you're here, as well, like and subscribe and check out our social media on Instagram and Facebook under the same name as down there. Thanks.